right, welcome back, Sports Talker Nation. Once again, it's your host, the G-Man, as we continue our 2015 team-by-team NFL review. Today, we're going to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, and what a mixed bag. As an Eagles fan for many years, with Big Red Andy Reid as our coach, we experienced the highs and the lows, and I think Kansas City got to experience all that in 1 year. So let's start with what went right, what went wrong, and what I see for the future. So what went right is they really righted the ship. They had a horrible, horrible start that most teams would have collapsed under. They had terrible injuries. Jamal Charles, devastating injury. He's a great guy. People who don't know his story, listen to his story. He went on the ESPYs and talked about how his handicap and his stuttering problem and his learning disability affected him. And he's an inspiration to a lot of guys. He had a terrible knee injury. He'll be back. You root for a guy like that. But what went right despite that? They won 11 games in a row. And it was with Alex Smith at quarterback and with Charcandrick West and Spencer Ware, at running back. But they had Jeremy Maclin. They had a great tight end in Travis Kelce. Their offensive line played really well. And Andy Reid did what Andy Reid does well. This is going to sound like an insult, but it's not, because I do think he was the best coach in Eagles history. He can take a bad team or an average team to a certain point and make them a playoff contender, maybe even one step beyond a playoff contender. Now, he has never been able to win the big one, and I do think his play calling and his clock management hurt him, but he is very good at taking a team from point A to point B, so that certainly went right. Defensively, a ton went right. Their defensive backfield was awesome. They took a risk and drafted a really talented but troubled guy out of Washington, and he turned out to be a hell of a player. When you paired him with Sean Smith, who was big, strong, and physical, and Eric Berry manning the backfield, I think they were as good this year as Seattle's defensive backs. I really do. Marcus Peters really set them over the top, and they really performed unbelievably well. Having corners that good already opened up the pass rush, which was already fantastic. I mean, Houston was hurt a lot of the year. Taba Ali is not the player that he used to be, but they still can put pressure on the quarterback, and they did. At linebacker, Derek Johnson is ageless. He never gets enough credit because he plays an understated game, but if you watch him, he controls entire games. He is fast, he is smart, and he knows how to make plays on the ball. He used to be a big playmaker where he would get turnovers and interceptions and stuff. I don't think their defense rather dictates that any longer, but he's still a hell of a player. So that certainly went right as well. Their special teams went right. Niall Davis was supposed to be the backup running back. I think he is either not very smart and can't pick up the offense, or he's very stubborn and coaches don't like him. But they kept him around to be a kick returner. He was fantastic at it. DeAnthony Thomas has speed to burn, one of the fastest guys I've ever seen come out of college. Football speed, I'm not talking about 40 speed. So they had a lot go right. What went wrong? Well, as usual, they did lose in the playoffs, but the biggest thing that went wrong for them that you hope doesn't impact them moving forward is the injuries. Charles was the most notable, but they had a lot of injuries even in the wide receiver core, which was already thin. Offensive line was always banged up, and Byron Houston had surgery after the season, after, by the way, gutting it out and playing on what turned out to be a torn MCL. Very disappointing to see that he may actually miss a bunch of time this coming year. So that's a shame, especially for a hard player like that. But I have a lot of faith again in Andy Reid doing the right thing and becoming the team that they're supposed to be, and maybe even expanding. Alex Smith, you can put him in both categories of what went right and what went wrong. He went weeks and weeks without throwing an interception, but he just doesn't scare you. He doesn't put a team on his back, and he can't, and maybe that's okay. I think he's a top 15 quarterback in the NFL, maybe top 12. Nobody else seems to think that. I actually love his athleticism, but his arm, if you can play him close to the line and you have defensive end that can track him down so he can't run, he's going to struggle because he just doesn't have that deep arm. What's in the future? I think more of the same. I think Andy Reid produces at a certain level and will continue to produce at a certain level. They desperately need a wide receiver. Maclin played well, but they need a game-breaking wide receiver. Always hard to find. Everybody needs a wide receiver. They need offensive line help. And as their defense is starting to age a little bit, that defensive backfield certainly will help them, but they will have some defections out of there with potentially Sean Smith leaving. And they'll need some support on the front end to make sure that defensive backfield stands up well. But if I had to say, In their conference, in their division, I say they're a 10-6 team and probably a wild card team again. What happens from there will depend largely on health and whether Andy Reid can break through, stop with conservative play calling. But I see they have a decent future. Drafting late, they probably are not going to get a superstar, but they are in position to draft the best player available. So that's it from me. This is your 2015 Kansas City Chiefs NFL review. I'm your host, the G-Man, and I am out.